The wind didn't howl up here. It screamed. Colt Mercer stood at the window of his cabin, watching the storm tear across the ridge like it had a personal vendetta against anything still breathing. Snow came down in sheets so thick you couldn't see 10 feet past the porch. The kind of storm that killed people. The kind that reminded you the mountain didn't care about your plans, your problems, or whether you lived through the night. He liked it that way. 15 years he'd been up here. 15 years since he'd walked away from everything. The ranch that bore his family name, the people who thought they knew him, the woman who'd proven they didn't. 15 years of silence so deep it had become a language all its own. The cabin was small. One room, mostly. A stone fireplace he'd built himself dominated the north wall, throwing heat that barely reached the corners. A narrow bed against the east side, made tight every morning out of habit more than necessity. A table. 2 chairs, though he only ever used one. Shelves lined with supplies he rationed like a man expecting siege. Everything he owned could fit in a single wagon, and that was exactly how he wanted it. No photographs, no letters, no reminders of before. The fire crackled, spitting sparks onto the hearth. Outside, something crashed. A branch probably, or maybe part of the lean-to where he kept firewood. He'd check it in the morning, if there was a morning. Storms like this sometimes lasted days. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from a bottle he'd been nursing since October. It burned going down, settled warm in his chest. He didn't drink to forget anymore. Didn't need to. Time had done that work for him, worn the edges off memories until they were smooth and distant as river stones. The clock on the mantel, one of the few things he'd kept, read 8:15. He drained the glass, set it down, listened to the wind. That's when he heard it. At first, he thought it was the storm, a trick of the wind against the door maybe. But then it came again. A knock. Deliberate. Weak, but deliberate. Colt went still. Nobody came up here. Not in 15 years. Not in summer when the trail was clear. And sure as hell not in winter when the pass was buried under 6 feet of snow. Nobody even knew this place existed, except the old trapper who'd sold it to him. And that man had been dead for a decade. The knock came again. Softer this time. He crossed to the door in 3 strides, hand automatically moving to the rifle mounted above the frame. His fingers closed around worn wood, lifted it down. The weight of it was familiar, comforting. He checked the chamber, loaded, always loaded, and approached the door. "Who's there?" No answer, just the wind. He waited, counted to 10, then 20. The knock didn't come again. Colt's jaw tightened. Could be an animal. Could be the storm playing tricks. Could be someone bleeding out on his porch while he stood here second-guessing himself. He threw the bolt and yanked the door open. The wind hit him like a fist, driving snow into his face, stealing his breath. He squinted against it, rifle raised, and almost missed her. She was on her knees at the edge of the porch, one hand braced against the doorframe. A woman. Young, maybe late 20s, though it was hard to tell under all that snow. She wore a coat that might have been blue once, now soaked black and frozen stiff. Her hair hung in wet ropes across her face. She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. "Please," she said. The word came out broken, barely audible over the storm. "Please." Behind her, 2 shapes huddled against the cabin wall. Children. A boy, maybe 8 or 9. His arm wrapped around a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. They were pressed together like they were trying to become one person, sharing whatever warmth they had left. Which wasn't much. The boy's lips were blue. The girl wasn't shaking anymore. That was bad. When they stopped shaking, they were close to done. The woman tried to stand. Made it halfway before her legs gave out. She went down hard, caught herself on her hands, stayed there. "Please," she said again. "The kids. Just the kids. Please." Colt stood in the doorway, rifle lowering, watching her fight to breathe. He'd seen plenty of desperate people in his time, seen what desperation made them do, seen how it twisted them up inside until there was nothing left but the need to survive, and to hell with anyone in the way. This woman was desperate, but she wasn't begging for herself. The little girl's head lolled forward. The boy tightened his grip on her, and Colt saw his hands, small, red, covered in snow that had started to freeze to his skin. "Damn it," Colt muttered. He propped the rifle against the wall and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like a hammer, went straight through his shirt. He grabbed the woman under her arms, hauled her up. She was heavier than he expected, solid, substantial, and dead weight besides. Her head rolled against his shoulder. "Can you walk? The kids... Can you walk?" She nodded, tried. Her legs wobbled, but held. "Get inside, now." He half carried, half dragged her through the door and dropped her near the fire. She collapsed immediately, curling into herself. He went back for the children. The boy looked up at him with eyes that had already seen too much. Dark eyes, wary, filled with the kind of fear that didn't come from one bad night, that came from a lifetime of learning that adults meant pain. The woman, Ada, he'd learn later, though right now she was just woman and problem, reached for him with shaking hands. I'm okay, baby." She wasn't okay. None of them were. Colt worked fast, got the girl out of her wet things, wrapped her in every blanket he had. Her skin was gray, her breathing shallow. He rubbed her hands, her feet, trying to force warmth back into her. The boy stood frozen by the door, watching. "You," Colt said. "Out of those clothes. Now." The boy didn't move. "She dies. It's on you. Move." That got him. The boy's face crumpled for just a second, there and gone. And then he was peeling off his frozen coat with clumsy fingers. Colt grabbed a spare shirt, tossed it to him. "Put that on. Get by the fire." He turned back to Ada. She was trying to sit up, failing. "Stay down," he said. "My kids are alive. Barely. You brought them through a killing storm in the dark. What the hell were you thinking?" She looked at him then. Really looked. Her face was round, windburned, marked by exhaustion that went bone deep. But her eyes were sharp, aware, not broken. "I was thinking," she said slowly, "that freezing to death was better than what was behind us." The words hung in the air between them. Colt studied her for a moment longer, then turned away. "There's soup in the pot." It took him 20 minutes to get them all stabilized. The little girl, Emma, the boy called her, started breathing easier once he got her warm. The boy, whose name was Thomas, drank soup like he hadn't eaten in days. Probably hadn't. Ada refused the soup at first, kept trying to give her portion to the kids. "They already ate," Colt said. "Drink it." "I'm fine." "You're hypothermic and half-starved. Drink the damn soup." She met his eyes. Something flickered there. Defiance, maybe, or pride. Then it faded, and she drank. The storm raged outside. Inside, the fire burned. Nobody spoke. Thomas sat on the floor next to Emma, one hand resting on her arm like he needed to make sure she was still breathing. Ada leaned against the wall, eyes closed, cup cradled in both hands. Colt stood by the window, watching the snow pile up against the glass. He'd made a choice. Let them in. Now he had to live with it. "How far behind you are they?" he asked. Ada's eyes opened. "What?" "Whatever you're running from. How far behind?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Colt turned from the window, looked at her, at the kids, at the way Thomas watched him like he was waiting for the hit, and the way Emma's hand was wrapped tight around her brother's sleeve even in sleep. "You're lying," he said. Ada's jaw tightened. "Maybe. Not maybe. You knew exactly where you were going when you showed up on my door, which means you know this place exists, which means someone told you, which means someone's coming." "No one's coming. Not in this storm." "Storm won't last forever." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set down the cup and straightened despite the exhaustion written all over her. "You want us to leave? We'll leave. First light. Or now, if you want. But those kids aren't going back. I'll die first. So if that's what you're working toward, just get it over with." Her voice didn't shake, didn't beg. She just said it flat and certain, like she'd already made her peace with whatever came next. Colt realized suddenly that he believed her. "I didn't say I wanted you to leave." "Then what do you want?" Good question. He'd spent 15 years not wanting anything except to be left alone. Now here he was with 3 strangers dripping on his floor, and the only thing he wanted was answers he probably wasn't going to get. "The truth would be nice." Ada laughed. It was a bitter sound, sharp-edged. "The truth." "Yeah. The truth is I'm a fat woman with 2 kids and nothing else. The truth is my husband was a thief and a liar, And when he died, he left us with debts we'll never pay and people who don't care that he's gone. The truth is, I ran because staying meant losing my children, and I'd burn the whole world down before I let that happen. Is that enough truth for you, cowboy? The firelight caught her face, threw shadows across the hollows under her eyes. She looked fierce, unbroken, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with guns or fists. Colt found himself nodding. It's a start. Good, because that's all you're getting tonight. She pulled Thomas close, wrapped an arm around him. The boy leaned into her, finally letting himself be a child for a moment. Emma stirred in her sleep, made a small sound. You can have the bed, Colt said. All of you. Where will you sleep? I won't. It wasn't entirely true. He'd doze in the chair by the fire, rifle across his lap, listening to the storm, and to the strangers in his house, and to the silence between. But she didn't need to know that. Ada nodded slowly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He meant it. Morning would bring questions, and questions would bring answers. And answers would bring whatever was hunting them right to his door. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he fed the fire and listened to 3 people breathe and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The storm didn't break for 3 days. 3 days of being trapped in a one-room cabin with 2 terrified kids and a woman who looked at him like she was waiting for him to turn into a monster. 3 days of rationing supplies and keeping the fire going and trying not to step on anyone in a space that was barely big enough for 1 person, let alone 4. Thomas didn't speak unless spoken to, sat in corners, watched everything. The kid moved like he expected violence at any moment, like he'd learned to make himself small and quiet and forgettable. Emma didn't speak at all. She clung to Thomas or Ada, never more than an arm's length away. When Colt looked at her, she hid her face. When he moved, she flinched. She was 5 years old and already knew that men were dangerous. It made something twist in Colt's chest, something he thought he'd carved out years ago. Ada, though. Ada was different. That first morning, he woke to find her reorganizing his supplies. Not moving things around random, actually organizing them. Dry goods on one shelf, sorted by what would last. Tools on another. Medical supplies, what little he had, lined up where they could be reached fast. What are you doing? He asked. She didn't stop. You had flour buried behind ammunition and bandages next to beans. Now you don't. I knew where everything was. No, you thought you knew. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. He'd been up here so long, living day to day, that he'd stopped thinking about efficiency. Stopped thinking about anything except getting through to tomorrow. We're low on salt, she said, not looking at him. And you're almost out of coffee. I know. Do you have a cache somewhere outside? He hesitated. Yeah. Good. Because what's in here won't last a week if we're careful. 3 days if we're not. She said we like she'd already decided they were staying. Like she'd done the math and figured out exactly how long they could survive and what it would cost. Colt studied her. In daylight, he could see her more clearly. She was big, not just heavy, but tall, broad-shouldered, built solid. The kind of build that came from hard work, not softness. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a braid that was coming loose. Her face was plain, unremarkable, marked by years of weather and worry. But her hands were steady, and her eyes, when they met his, didn't look away. You know your way around a survival situation, he said. I know my way around making nothing into something. She closed the flour bin, moved to the next shelf. You live alone long? 15 years. That explains the organization, or lack of it. I've managed fine. Fine gets you killed when things go wrong. She had a point. He hated that she had a point. Your husband teach you this? He asked. Her hand stilled for just a moment. No. My husband taught me what not to do. I learned the rest on my own. There was a story there, probably a bad one. Colt decided not to push. Kids don't talk much, he said instead. They talk to me. Emma doesn't talk to anyone. Ada's shoulders tightened. She's 5. She's been through things 5-year-olds shouldn't go through. She'll talk when she's ready. And Thomas? Thomas is 8, and he's had to be the man of the house since he was 6. He'll talk when he trusts you, which might be never, so don't hold your breath. The words were sharp, defensive, protective. Colt recognized it because he'd felt it himself once, a long time ago. I'm not going to hurt them, he said quietly. Ada turned then, looked at him full on. You say that now, everyone says that, and maybe you even mean it. But people change when things get hard, when they get scared, when they realize what they've gotten themselves into. You think I'm going to turn on you? I think you're a man who lives alone in the middle of nowhere with a rifle over his door and enough supplies to wait out the apocalypse. I think you let us in because you didn't want 3 corpses on your porch. And I think when this storm breaks and you realize what kind of trouble we brought, you're going to point us toward the pass and tell us good luck. She wasn't wrong. Colt had been thinking exactly that. Get them fed, get them warm, get them gone. But looking at her now, at the way she stood between him and her children, at the set of her jaw, at the exhaustion and determination burning in equal measure, he realized something. She wasn't asking him to save them. She was asking him not to make it worse. The pass is buried, he said. Even after the storm breaks, it'll be a week before anyone can get through. Maybe more. So we're trapped. Yeah, Ada nodded slowly. Then I guess we'd better figure out how to live together. She went back to organizing. Colt stood there for a moment, watching her work. Then he grabbed his coat. Where are you going? She asked. To check the cache. If we're going to be here a while, we'll need more than what's in this room. In this weather? I've been in worse. It was barely true. The storm had eased some, but it was still brutal. He fought his way to the lean-to, then to the cache buried 30 yards from the cabin. Took him an hour to dig through the snow, pry open the hatch, haul supplies back through drifts that came up to his thighs. By the time he got back inside, he was half frozen and breathing hard. Ada took one look at him and pointed to the fire. Sit. I'm fine. You're hypothermic. Sit. She had soup waiting, hot, thick, better than anything he'd made in years. He wanted to ask how she'd managed it with his limited supplies, but his teeth were chattering too hard to form words. Thomas watched him from across the room. The boy's expression was unreadable. Emma was asleep on the bed, curled into a ball under every blanket. She always sleep this much? Colt asked, when he could talk again. She's still recovering, Ada said. We were out there for 2 days before we found you. 2 days in that storm? We had shelter, sort of. A cave, about 3 miles east. That's a long walk in the snow. It's a longer walk with 2 kids. She ladled more soup into his bowl without asking. Drink. He drank. The warmth spread through him, chased away the cold that had settled into his bones. Why'd you leave the cave? He asked. Because they were getting closer. They. Ada sat down across from him, folded her hands on the table. The men my husband owed money to. They found us in Helena. We ran. They followed. We lost them in the mountains, but I knew they wouldn't stop. So when the storm hit, I thought maybe we could use it, cover our tracks, get somewhere they wouldn't think to look. How'd you know about this place? She hesitated. I didn't. Not exactly. There's an old trapper who passes through Helena sometimes. He mentioned a cabin up in the high country, said it was off the main trails, hard to find. Said the man who lived there didn't take kindly to visitors. She met his eyes. Figured that meant he wouldn't turn us in. Could have meant he'd shoot you on sight. Could have. But getting shot seemed better than the alternative. Colt set down his spoon. What's the alternative? Ada was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattled the windows. My husband stole money, she said finally. A lot of money. From people who don't forgive debts. When he died, they came for me. Said I was responsible, said I owed them. Her voice dropped. Said my kids could work it off. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Work it off, Colt repeated. You know what that means. He did. He'd seen it before, back when he still went to towns. Seen what happened to people who couldn't pay. Seen what happened to their kids. How much did he steal? 50,000. Colt whistled low. That's a fortune. That's a death sentence. Ada looked at her children. They don't care that I didn't know. Don't care that he's dead. They just want their money. And if they can't have that, they'll take whatever they can get. You don't have it. No. He spent it, gambled most of it away, drank the rest. I found out about the debt 3 days after his funeral. Found out about the men coming for us 2 days after that. She turned back to him. So I took my kids and I ran. Been running ever since. How long? 6 months? 6 months of running. 6 months of looking over her shoulder, 6 months of teaching her children to be afraid. Colt understood suddenly why Thomas watched everything, why Emma didn't speak, why Ada looked at him like she was waiting for betrayal. Because betrayal was all they'd known. "They're not going to stop," he said. "No. Storm or no storm, they'll keep looking." "I know. And when they find you, I know." Ada's voice was steady, resigned. "That's why I'm asking you, when they come, don't try to be a hero. Don't fight. Just let us go. You saved our lives. That's more than anyone else has done. But I won't let you die for us." Colt looked at her. At this woman who'd walked through hell to protect her children, who'd reorganized his cabin and made his supplies last and refused to let herself break even when breaking would have been easier. "What if I don't want to let you go?" he asked. Ada blinked. "What? What if I want to fight? You don't even know us. I know enough. You know we're trouble. You know we're going to get you killed. Maybe," Colt leaned back in his chair, "or maybe I'm tired of living like the world already ended. Maybe I'm tired of being alone. Maybe—" He stopped, started again. "Maybe I'm just tired of running." "You're not running, you're hiding." "Same thing." "No," Ada said quietly. "It's not." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm howled. Finally, Ada spoke. "Why'd you come up here 15 years ago? What were you running from?" Colt considered not answering, considered telling her it was none of her business, considered lying. But she'd given him truth. Hard, ugly truth. Seemed only fair to return the favor. "A woman," he said. "Her name was Sarah. We were engaged, had a ranch, had plans, had a whole future laid out. Then I found out she'd been sleeping with my brother for 2 years. They were going to take the ranch, take everything, leave me with nothing." He stared into the fire. "So I left first. Walked away from all of it. Came up here. Figured if I didn't have anything, no one could take it from me. Did it work? For 15 years, yeah, it worked fine. And now?" Colt looked at her, at Thomas, at Emma sleeping on his bed. "Now I'm not so sure." Ada nodded slowly, like she understood, like maybe she'd been asking herself the same question. "The storm's going to break soon," she said. "And when it does, I know. We should have a plan. We should." But neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. They just sat there, two broken people in a tiny cabin, surrounded by snow and silence, and the weight of choices neither of them wanted to make. And outside, the mountain kept its secrets. For now. The storm broke on the 4th day. Colt woke to silence. Not the howling, battering silence of wind against wood, but actual quiet. The kind that made your ears ring because you'd forgotten what it sounded like. He sat up in the chair, neck stiff from another night of half-sleep. The fire had burned down to coals. Gray light filtered through the windows, soft and strange after days of white chaos. Ada was already awake. She stood at the window, one hand pressed against the glass, looking out at a world buried under snow. "It stopped," she said without turning around. "Yeah. How long before the pass clears?" "Week, maybe more." "And how long before they can get up here?" Colt stood, joints popping. "Depends on how bad they want you." Ada's reflection in the glass showed nothing. No fear, no relief. Just that same tired determination he'd seen since the first night. "They want us bad enough," she said. Thomas stirred on the bed, curled around his sister. The boy's eyes opened, found Colt immediately, tracked his movement across the room. Always watching, always waiting for the threat. "Morning," Colt said. Thomas didn't answer, just kept staring. Emma shifted in her sleep, made a small sound. Thomas's hand immediately went to her hair, smoothing it down in a gesture so automatic it hurt to watch. 8 years old and already playing parent. "There's oatmeal," Ada said. "I made it an hour ago, still warm." "You didn't have to do that." "I was awake anyway." She'd been doing that. Taking over small tasks without asking. Cooking, cleaning, organizing. Like she was trying to earn her keep, prove her worth, make herself useful enough that he wouldn't throw them out when the storm passed. Like she still expected him to. Colt ladled oatmeal into a bowl, ate standing up. It was good. Better than anything he'd made in years. She'd found the honey he'd forgotten about, the dried berries he'd shoved in the back of a shelf. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" "Making things work. Making nothing into something." Ada finally turned from the window. "I've had practice." "How'd you end up with him? Your husband?" It was too personal, too soon. But they'd been living on top of each other for 4 days now, and the silence had started to feel heavier than conversation. Ada was quiet for a long moment. Then she shrugged. "I was 19, fat, poor. My father had just died and left me with a farm I couldn't run and debts I couldn't pay. Marcus showed up with cash and promises, and a smile that made you think he actually saw you instead of just looking past you." She paused. "Turns out he saw me fine, saw exactly what I was, desperate enough to say yes." "He treat you bad?" "He treated me like I was useful when he needed something and invisible when he didn't. Gambled, drank, disappeared for days. But he gave me Thomas and Emma, so I stayed. Figured that was the best I was going to get." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "Then he went and got himself killed in a card game over money he didn't have, and suddenly I was responsible for all of it. His debts, his mistakes, his choices. That's not fair." "Fair's got nothing to do with it." Thomas had sat up now, watching them both. Emma was awake too, silent and wide-eyed, her small hand clutching her brother's shirt. "You kids hungry?" Colt asked. Thomas nodded slowly. "There's oatmeal." "Help yourself." The boy didn't move, just looked at his mother. "It's okay," Ada said softly. "Go on." Thomas slid off the bed, Emma attached to him like a shadow. He approached the pot like it might bite him, ladled out 2 small portions, brought them back to the bed. They ate in silence, huddled together. Colt watched them. Watched the way Thomas tested each bite first before letting Emma eat. Watched the way Emma wouldn't touch her food until her brother nodded. Watched the way they both kept their eyes on the door. "How long since they felt safe?" he asked quietly. Ada's jaw tightened. "They've never felt safe." The words hung there, ugly and true. Colt set down his bowl. "I need to check the perimeter, see what the storm did." "I'll come with you. Someone should stay with the kids. Thomas can watch Emma for 20 minutes. It wasn't a request. Colt grabbed his coat, tossed Ada a spare. She put it on without comment, even though it hung huge on her frame. Outside, the world had been remade. Snow piled 8 feet high in drifts against the cabin. The lean-to had partially collapsed under the weight. Trees bent double, branches snapped and scattered. The sky was clear and painfully blue, the sun so bright off the snow it made his eyes water. And it was cold. The kind of cold that got inside your lungs and stayed there. Ada stood on the porch, taking it in. "We could have died out here." "Yeah." "You saved our lives." "I opened a door, that's all." "That's everything." She moved down the steps, sank knee-deep into a drift, kept going. Colt followed, watching her move. She was slow, ungainly in the deep snow, but she didn't stop, didn't complain. Just pushed forward with the same grim determination she brought to everything else. They circled the cabin, checking for damage. The lean-to could be fixed. Some of the shutters had torn loose. One section of the roof looked questionable. "There," Ada said suddenly. Colt looked where she was pointing. Tracks, fresh ones, cutting across the clearing about 50 yards out. Big tracks. Too big for deer. "Mountain lion," he said. "Probably smelled the smoke, came to investigate." "Will it come back?" "Maybe. They're hungry this time of year." Ada stared at the tracks for a long moment. Then she turned and headed back toward the cabin without a word. Inside, Thomas and Emma hadn't moved from the bed. They sat exactly as they'd been left, bowls empty, hands folded, waiting. "We're going to need more firewood," Colt said. "Storm took down some trees. Good dry wood under all that snow." "I'll help," Ada said. "You'll freeze." "So will you." "I know what I'm doing out there." "Then teach me." Colt opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. If they were going to be stuck here, she needed to know how to survive. Needed to know how to keep her kids alive if something happened to him. When, not if, because something always happened. "Fine," he said. "But we do it my way." They spent the next 3 hours hauling wood. Colt showed her how to tell good timber from bad, how to stack it so it dried right, how to read the snow for danger signs. She learned fast, didn't waste time with stupid questions, just watched, listened, did. Her hands were red and raw by the time they finished, even with gloves. She didn't mention it. Thomas appeared in the doorway around noon. "Mama?" Ada looked up. "What's wrong?" "Emma won't eat." They went inside. Emma sat on the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. Her face was pale, her breathing too fast. "Hey, baby," Ada said softly, kneeling beside her. "What's going on?" Emma didn't answer, didn't even look at her. "She's been like this for an hour," Thomas said quietly. "I tried giving her water. She won't take it." Ada reached for her daughter. Emma flinched back, pressed herself against the wall. "Emma, it's Mama. You're okay. You're safe." But Emma wasn't there. Not really. She was somewhere else. Somewhere dark, reliving something Colt couldn't see. "She does this sometimes," Thomas said. His voice was small, scared. "When she remembers." "Remembers what?" Colt asked. Thomas looked at his mother. Ada's face had gone hard. "The night Marcus died," she said quietly. "Emma was there. She saw it." "Saw what?" "Everything." Ada pulled Emma close despite the girl's resistance, held her tight. "The card game, the fight, the man who shot him. She was hiding under the table. They didn't know she was there. She's 5 years old." "I know how old she is." Ada's voice cracked for the first time since they'd arrived. "You think I don't know? You think I don't see it every time she looks at me? Every time she stops talking because she's back in that room watching her father bleed out on a saloon floor?" Emma started crying. Silent, awful tears that shook her whole body. Ada held her, rocked her, whispered things Colt couldn't hear. Thomas stood frozen, hands clenched into fists, watching his sister fall apart. Colt wanted to leave, give them privacy, give them space. But there was nowhere to go. The cabin was too small. Their pain filled every corner, so he did the only thing he could think of. He put on coffee. Real coffee, the good stuff he'd been saving. Filled the cabin with the smell of something normal, something warm, something that wasn't fear and grief. After a while, Emma's crying slowed, stopped. She stayed curled against Ada, exhausted, her small fingers twisted in her mother's shirt. "She'll sleep now," Thomas said quietly. "She always sleeps after." Ada lifted Emma onto the bed, tucked her in. The girl's eyes were already closing, her face slack with exhaustion. "How often does this happen?" Colt asked. "Once a week? Sometimes more." Ada sat down heavily at the table. "The doctor and Helena said it was trauma, said she needed time, said she might never talk again." "You believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." Colt poured coffee, set a cup in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it like she was trying to pull all the warmth in the world into her palms. "My brother used to get like that," he said. "After the war, he'd be fine, then something would set him off and he'd be back in Virginia watching men die. Took him years to come back from it." "Did he?" "Eventually." It was a lie. His brother had eaten a bullet in a barn 10 years ago, but Ada didn't need to hear that. Thomas climbed onto the bed next to Emma, positioned himself between her and the room, protecting her even in sleep. "He's too young to carry all that," Colt said. "He doesn't have a choice." "Neither do you." Ada looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You trying to make a point?" "Just saying. You didn't ask for any of this. Your husband's debts, the running, the fear. You're doing the best you can with a bad hand. The best I can got my kids traumatized and half frozen in a stranger's cabin in the middle of nowhere. The best you could got them alive." Ada was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down the cup. "You know what the worst part is?" she said. "It's not the running, it's not the cold or the fear or the not knowing if we're going to see tomorrow. It's the fact that I knew. I knew Marcus was no good. Knew he was lying, stealing, gambling everything away. And I stayed. I looked at those men he brought around, the way they talked, the way they looked at me like I was already dead. And I stayed. Because I thought—" She stopped, started again. "I thought having a man, even a bad one, was better than being alone." "You're not alone now." "No. Now I'm your problem." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She stood abruptly. "We'll leave as soon as the past clears. I'll figure something out. I always do." "Ada, don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't pretend this is anything other than what it is. You let us in because you're a decent man who couldn't let 3 people freeze to death. But decency only goes so far. And when those men come, and they will come, you're going to realize that we're not worth dying for. You don't know that. I know men. I know how they think. I know what they do when things get hard. She moved to the window, stared out at the snow. You're different. I can see that. But different doesn't mean stupid, and fighting for us would be the stupidest thing you could do. Colt stood, crossed to where she was standing. She didn't look at him. You want to know why I really came up here? He said quietly. It wasn't just Sarah. Wasn't just the ranch. It was because I'd spent my whole life fighting for things that didn't matter. Land, money, pride. And when it all fell apart, I realized I'd never fought for anything that actually meant something. So you ran. So I ran. He paused. But running doesn't change what you are. Doesn't change what you want. I thought if I came up here, stayed alone, didn't let anyone in, I wouldn't have to face that. Wouldn't have to admit that maybe I was wrong. Wrong about what? About being alone being safer than being with people. He looked at her reflection in the glass. You and your kid showed up and reminded me what I've been running from. Not Sarah, not my brother, not the ranch, just life. Real life. The messy, complicated, dangerous kind that actually matters. Ada turned then, met his eyes. You don't know us. I know enough. You know we're trouble. Everyone's trouble. Question is whether they're worth it. And are we? Colt thought about Thomas testing Emma's food, about Ada reorganizing his supplies in the middle of the night, about the way they'd stumbled out of a killing storm and refused to break even when breaking would have been easier. Yeah, he said. You are. Ada searched his face for a long moment, looking for the lie, looking for the catch, looking for the moment he'd turn on them like everyone else had. She didn't find it. You're going to get yourself killed, she said finally. Probably. I'm not asking you to fight. I know. I'm asking you not to. I know that too. She shook her head, something almost like a smile crossing her face. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the dumbest. Can it be both? This time she did smile. Small, tired, but real. They stood there for a moment, the silence between them different than it had been. Less sharp, less afraid. Then Emma whimpered in her sleep, and the moment broke. Ada went to her daughter. Colt went back to the fire. Thomas watched them both with those dark, knowing eyes. Outside, the sun moved across the sky. The snow settled. The mountain held its breath. And somewhere down in the valley, men were planning. That night, Colt taught Thomas how to load a rifle. The boy was too small for it. The stock came up to his shoulder wrong, the barrel too heavy for his thin arms. But his hands were steady and his eyes were sharp, and he listened to every word like his life depended on it, because it did. Safety first, Colt said. Always. You check it every time you pick up the gun, every time someone hands it to you. Every time. Understand? Thomas nodded. Show me. The boy checked the safety, his small fingers fumbling with the mechanism. Again. He did it faster this time. Good. Now the magazine. Ada watched from the table, her face unreadable. Emma was asleep again, curled under blankets, her breathing soft and even. You don't have to do this, Ada said quietly. Yeah, Colt said. I do. Thomas loaded the magazine, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Got it wrong the first time, right the second. When do I shoot? He asked. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to Colt without being asked a question first. You don't, Colt said. Not unless there's no other choice. How do I know if there's no other choice? You'll know. Thomas looked at him, 8 years old and already too familiar with violence, with danger, with the choices that left scars. Will I have to kill someone? The boy asked. Colt could have lied, could have said no, could have promised everything would be fine, could have given him the comfort a child deserved. But Thomas wasn't asking for comfort. He was asking for truth. I don't know, Colt said. But if it comes to that, if it's them or you, them or your sister, them or your mother, you do what you have to do, and you don't feel bad about it after. Understand? Thomas nodded slowly. Will you teach me? To shoot? To survive? The word hung in the air between them, too big, too heavy, too real. Yeah, Colt said quietly. I'll teach you. They practiced until the boy's arms were shaking, until he could load, check, aim, and unload in his sleep, until the rifle felt like an extension of his body instead of a foreign object. When they were done, Thomas carefully set the gun aside and looked at Colt with something almost like respect. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Because we haven't gotten to the hard part. Ada put Thomas to bed next to his sister, kissed them both, whispered things Colt couldn't hear. When she came back to the table, her eyes were red. He shouldn't have to learn this, she said. No, he shouldn't. He should be playing, learning to read, being a child. He should be, but he's not. And pretending otherwise gets him killed. Ada pressed her palms against her eyes. I hate this. I know. I hate what it's doing to them. I hate that they're growing up scared. I hate that Thomas has to learn to shoot a gun and Emma doesn't remember how to smile. It won't always be like this. Won't it? She looked at him. Those men aren't going to stop. Even if we run, even if we hide, they'll find us eventually. And when they do, we'll deal with it. We? Colt leaned back in his chair. You're not running anymore. I'm not? No, you're staying here. All of you, at least until spring. Ada stared at him. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Colt, you don't understand what you're offering. I understand fine. No, you don't. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. These men, they're not just thugs. They're organized, connected. They have resources, weapons, people everywhere. They'll burn this cabin to the ground with us in it, if that's what it takes. Then we make sure it doesn't come to that. How? Good question. Colt didn't have an answer, didn't have a plan, didn't have anything except a stubborn refusal to let this woman and her children walk back out into the cold. We'll figure it out, he said. Ada laughed. It was a broken sound. You're insane. Probably. This is going to get you killed. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Maybe. Colt stood, moved to the window. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. But I've been dead for 15 years. Might as well actually live before it's over. He could feel Ada watching him, could feel the weight of her gaze, the question she was trying to ask. Finally, she spoke. Why are you doing this? Really? Colt thought about it. About Sarah and the ranch and the 15 years he'd spent convincing himself that alone was safer. About the way Thomas had looked at him when he said he'd teach him to survive. About Emma's silent tears and Ada's fierce determination and the feeling that had been growing in his chest since the moment he'd opened the door. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd been given a second chance. Because someone should have done it for me, he said quietly. Long time ago, and nobody did. And I don't want to be that person. Don't want to be the one who closes the door when someone needs it open. Ada was quiet for a long time. Then she stood, crossed to where he was standing, and put her hand on his shoulder. Thank you, she said. Just that. Nothing more. But it was enough. They stood there in the darkness, two broken people trying to build something whole, while outside the mountain kept watch and the stars burned cold and bright. And somewhere in the valley below, men sharpened their knives and counted their bullets and prepared for war. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Almost. Colt woke before dawn each morning, checked the perimeter, looked for tracks that didn't belong. Ada cooked breakfast with whatever they had, stretched supplies that should have run out days ago. Thomas practiced with the rifle under Colt's watchful eye, his small hands growing steadier each day. Emma watched from the window, silent as always, her fingers pressed against the glass. On the 8th day she spoke. It was mid-morning. Ada was mending clothes by the fire, her needle moving in quick, efficient strokes. Thomas sat at the table, practicing his letters in the dirt Colt had spread across the wood. Emma was on the bed, playing with a carved wooden horse Colt had made her the night before. Then, so soft Colt almost missed it. Mama. Ada's hand stopped mid-stitch. She looked up slowly, like she was afraid any sudden movement would shatter the moment. Yes, baby? Emma held up the horse. His name is Thunder. The words were small, uncertain, like she'd forgotten how to use them and was testing whether they still worked. Ada's face crumpled. She crossed the room in 3 steps, pulled Emma into her arms, buried her face in her daughter's hair. Her shoulders shook. Thomas looked up from his letters, eyes wide. "Emma?" "Hi, Tommy." Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it was there. Real, solid. Colt turned away, gave them privacy. Stepped outside into the cold before anyone could see his face. The air bit at his lungs, sharp and clean. He stood on the porch, hands braced against the railing, and breathed. Inside, he could hear Ada crying, could hear Emma's small voice, hesitant but growing stronger, could hear Thomas asking his sister questions he'd probably been saving up for months. 15 years Colt had lived alone. 15 years of silence. He thought he preferred it that way. Thought the quiet was peace. He'd been wrong. The door opened behind him. Ada stepped out, wrapped in his spare coat, her eyes red but clear. "She's talking," she said. "I heard." "I didn't think—" Her voice caught. "The doctor said she might never—" "Doctors don't know everything." Ada laughed, wiping at her face. "She told me she likes it here. Said it's quiet. Said she feels safe." "Good. It's because of you." "It's because of you," Colt corrected. "You got her here. You kept her alive. I just opened a door." That door saved her life. She saved her own life. She just needed time. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb over the ridge. The snow had started to melt in patches, revealing brown earth and dead grass. Spring was still months away, but winter was loosening its grip. "The pass will clear soon," Ada said quietly. "Probably. And then they'll come." "Yeah." She turned to face him. "We should run. While we still can. Take the kids, head west, find somewhere they'll never think to look. And how long before they find you again? Maybe they won't." "You don't believe that." Ada's jaw tightened. "No, I don't." "Then we stay. We prepare. We fight if we have to." "You keep saying we like you're part of this." "I am part of this." "You don't have to be." Colt looked at her. Really looked. At the exhaustion carved into her face, at the fear she tried to hide, at the stubborn strength that kept her standing when anyone else would have collapsed. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Inside, Emma was singing something, off-key and quiet, but singing. The sound drifted through the door like sunlight through clouds. Ada closed her eyes, listened. "I haven't heard her sing since Marcus died." "How'd he die?" "Really?" She opened her eyes. "I told you! Card game. Got caught cheating. Man put 2 bullets in his chest before anyone could stop him." And Emma saw it. She was under the table. Marcus had taken her to the saloon because I was sick, and he didn't want to watch her himself. She was playing with her doll, staying quiet like he'd taught her. Then the shooting started. Ada's voice went flat, distant. She stayed under that table for 3 hours. Didn't move, didn't scream, just sat there with her father's blood pooling around her feet while men argued over who was responsible. "Where were you?" "Home." "Burning with fever. Didn't even know she was gone until someone brought her back." Ada's hands clenched. She didn't talk after that. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Just stared at nothing like she was still under that table watching him die. "And the men who came for the debt? Showed up 2 weeks later. Said Marcus owed them $50,000, said I was responsible now. Said if I couldn't pay, my kids could work it off." Her voice hardened. "So I took what little we had, grabbed the kids, and ran. Been running ever since." Colt thought about Emma under that table, about Thomas learning to be silent and invisible, about Ada carrying them both through 6 months of hell on nothing but will. "You did good," he said. "I got them traumatized and hunted. You got them alive. That's more than most people could do." Ada looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, just once, and went back inside. Colt stayed on the porch, watching the tree line, looking for movement that wasn't there. Not yet. 2 days later, Thomas shot his first rabbit. They were a quarter-mile from the cabin, working a line of snares Colt had set the week before. The boy moved quiet through the snow, reading tracks, checking each trap with the careful attention Colt had drilled into him. The rabbit was in the 3rd snare, still alive, struggling against the wire. "What do I do?" Thomas asked. Colt handed him the knife. "Quick and clean, behind the head, 1 cut." Thomas took the blade, his hand shaking slightly. He knelt beside the rabbit, positioned the knife. "I don't want to hurt it. he said quietly. It's already hurt. You're ending it. That's different. How? Because you're doing it for a reason, for food, for survival, not because you want to cause pain. Thomas nodded slowly. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he made the cut. The rabbit went still. The boy stayed kneeling in the snow, the bloody knife in his hand, staring at what he'd done. You okay? Colt asked. I killed it. You did. Does it get easier? Colt thought about the men he'd killed during the range wars, about the weight that never quite left his shoulders, even after 15 years. No, he said, but you get used to carrying it. Thomas cleaned the knife in the snow, stood up. His face was pale but set. Will I have to kill a person? I hope not. But I might. Yeah, you might. The boy looked at the rabbit, then at Colt. Will you teach me how? How to kill? How to live with it after? The question hit harder than it should have. Colt had spent 15 years trying to answer it himself and still hadn't found anything that worked. I don't know if anyone can teach you that, he said finally, but I'll try. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the rabbit swinging from Thomas's belt. When they got close, Emma was on the porch, watching for them. Tommy killed a rabbit, she called out. Her voice was stronger now, still quiet, still hesitant, but there. Present. Thomas held up the rabbit, tried to smile. It came out shaky, uncertain. We're having meat tonight, Colt said. Ada came to the door, took in her son's face, the blood on his hands, the way he held himself like he'd just crossed some invisible line. Come here, she said softly. Thomas went to her. She pulled him close, rabbit and all, and held him while he shook. You did good, she whispered. You did so good, baby. That night they had rabbit stew. Emma ate 3 bowls. Thomas picked at his. Couldn't quite meet anyone's eyes. Ada kept her hand on his shoulder the whole meal, steady and sure. After the kids were asleep, Colt and Ada sat by the fire. He's too young for this, she said. I know. He should be learning arithmetic and how to spell, not how to kill things. He's learning both. It's not enough. It's not... She stopped, shook her head. This isn't the life I wanted for them. What life did you want? Ada stared into the flames. Normal, safe, a house with a garden, Thomas in school, making friends, Emma playing with dolls and learning to read, Sunday dinners, birthdays, Christmas. Just normal. Normal's overrated, says the man who's been hiding from it for 15 years. Colt couldn't argue with that. They're good kids, he said instead. They are. Strong, resilient, smarter than they should be. They've had to be. You've done a good job with them, despite everything. Ada looked at him. You really believe that? Yeah, I do. She was quiet for a long time. Then, so soft he almost missed it. Thank you. The next morning, Colt spotted fresh tracks. Not mountain lion this time, not deer or elk or anything that belonged up here. Horses. 3 of them. Coming up from the valley, following the ridge line, stopping a quarter-mile from the cabin. He crouched in the snow, studying the prints. Recent. Maybe 6 hours old. The horses had milled around for a while, like the riders were watching something. Then they'd turned back the way they came. Scouts. Colt's blood went cold. He followed the tracks for half a mile, far enough to confirm what he already knew. They'd found the cabin, found Ada, found the kids. Now they were going back to report. He made it back to the cabin in 20 minutes, moving fast through the snow. Ada was at the window when he came in, reading his face before he said a word. They're here, she said. Not a question. They were here. Last night. They're gone now, but they'll be back. How many? 3 horses. Could be more. Ada's face went pale. How long do we have? Day. Maybe 2. Depends on how far down they had to go to regroup. We should run. Won't matter. They know where we are now. They'll track us. Then what do we do? Colt crossed to the rifle rack, started checking weapons. We get ready. Thomas appeared in the doorway, Emma behind him. Ready for what? Ada opened her mouth, probably to lie, to protect them, to give them one more day of pretending everything was fine. Colt spoke first. Men are coming. Bad men. We're going to have to fight. Colt, Ada started. They deserve to know. Thomas's face went very still, very calm. The same expression Colt had seen when he'd killed the rabbit. Are they the men Mama's running from? The boy asked. Yeah. Are they going to kill us? Not if I can help it. What do you need me to do? He was 8 years old and asking how he could help in a war. Colt wanted to tell him to hide, to stay safe, to let the adults handle it. But Thomas wasn't asking to be protected. He was asking to fight. You remember everything I taught you? Colt asked. Yes, sir. Then you're going to help me set traps. Make this mountain work for us instead of them. Thomas nodded once, sharp and certain. When do we start? Now. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Colt showed Thomas how to rig tripwires across the approaches to the cabin, how to set snares designed for men instead of rabbits, how to create false trails that led to deadfalls and hidden pits. Ada turned the cabin into a fortress, covered the windows with shutters, moved supplies away from walls, created firing positions, rationed food and water like they were preparing for siege. Because they were. Emma helped where she could, carrying things, following instructions, her small face serious and focused. They worked until dark, then past dark, until exhaustion finally dragged them inside. Is this enough? Ada asked, looking at their preparations. No, Colt said honestly, but it's what we've got. She nodded, accepting the truth of it. That night, none of them slept well. Colt kept watch from the window, rifle across his lap, listening to the mountains settle around them. Thomas tossed and turned on the bed, fighting dreams. Emma whimpered in her sleep. Ada sat at the table, hands folded, praying to something she probably didn't believe in anymore. Dawn came gray and cold. Colt saw them at first light. 6 riders, moving slow and careful up the trail, their horses picking through snow that came up to their chests. They wore heavy coats, hats pulled low, armed, organized, professional, not debt collectors, hunters. They're here, he said quietly. Ada joined him at the window, saw the riders, went very still. 6, she said. Yeah. We can't fight 6 men. We can try. Colt, I'm not letting them take you. They'll kill you. Probably. Then why? He turned to face her. Because I'd rather die trying than live knowing I didn't. Ada stared at him. You're an idiot. Been called worse. Outside, the riders stopped at the edge of the clearing. One of them dismounted, walked forward a few steps, raised his hands to show they were empty. Mercer, he called. Colt Mercer, we know you're in there. Colt opened the window an inch. Keep walking and there won't be trouble. The man laughed. Little late for that. We're not here for you, Mercer. We're here for the woman, Ada Boone. She owes a debt. We're here to collect. She doesn't have your money. Don't care. Debt's a debt. We'll take it out in trade. Not happening. You gonna fight all 6 of us over some whore and her bastards? Colt felt Ada flinch beside him, felt the rage building in his chest, cold and familiar. Yeah, he said quietly. I am. The man shook his head. Your funeral, old man. We'll give you 1 hour. Send her out, we ride away. Keep her, we burn that cabin down with all of you in it. 60 minutes, Colt said. Then we find out who burns. He closed the window, turned to Ada. Her face was white, her hands shaking. You can't do this, she said. Already doing it. They'll kill you. They'll kill all of us. Maybe, but at least we'll go down fighting. Thomas appeared beside them, rifle in his small hands. Where do you want me? Colt looked at this boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd learned to kill to survive, who was standing here ready to die because it was better than letting bad men win. Northwest corner, he said. Cover the approach from the trees. Thomas nodded, moved to position. Emma watched from the bed, her doll clutched tight. Emma, Colt said gently, I need you to hide. Under the bed. No matter what happens, you stay there until someone you trust tells you to come out. Understand? Emma looked at her mother. Do what he says, baby, Ada whispered. The little girl crawled under the bed, disappeared into shadow. Ada grabbed Colt's arm. There has to be another way. There's always another way. But it usually involves running, and I'm done running. This isn't your fight. Yeah, Colt said. It is. He checked his rifle one more time. Checked the spare ammunition. Checked the positions, the fields of fire. The escape routes they probably wouldn't need. Outside, the riders waited. The mountain held its breath. And somewhere in the distance, a crow called out, harsh and final. Colt looked at Ada, at Thomas, at the space under the bed where Emma was hiding. Whatever happens, he said quietly, you fight. You survive. You don't give up. Understand? Ada's eyes filled with tears. I understand. Good. The hour ticked down in silence. 50 minutes, 40, 30. At 20 minutes, one of the riders pulled a torch from his saddlebag. At 10 minutes, they started spreading out, surrounding the cabin. At 5 minutes, Colt took his position by the window and sighted down his rifle. At 1 minute, the lead rider raised his hand. At 0, all hell broke loose. The first shot came from the trees, hit the cabin wall 6 inches from Colt's head, sprayed splinters across his face. He fired back, saw one of the riders jerk and fall. Then everyone was shooting. Bullets tore through the walls, shattered glass, punched holes in the shutters. The cabin filled with smoke and noise and the sharp smell of gunpowder. Thomas fired from his corner, methodical and calm. Ada crouched by the south window, rifle braced, firing measured shots. Colt moved between positions, returning fire, keeping them pinned. One of the riders made it to the porch. Colt shot him through the door. The man went down screaming. Another came from the east, hit one of Thomas's tripwires. The snare caught his leg, yanked him off his feet. He went down hard, his gun skittering across the snow. 4 left. Then 3. As Ada's bullet caught one in the shoulder and he fell, clutching the wound. The riders pulled back, regrouped at the tree line. Reload! Colt shouted. They reloaded, checked ammunition. Thomas had 4 rounds left. Ada had 6. Colt had a dozen, plus what was in the rifle. Not enough. They're going to rush us, Ada said. I know. We can't hold them. We hold as long as we can. Outside, the remaining riders lit torches. They're going to burn us out, Thomas said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Colt looked at Ada. She looked back, and in that moment, they both knew. This was it. This was how it ended. I'm sorry, Colt said. For what? For not being enough. Ada crossed to him, put her hand against his face. You were more than enough. You were everything. Then she kissed him, brief, desperate, final. The riders charged, and Colt raised his rifle one more time, ready to make his last stand count. The first rider hit Thomas's second tripwire at a dead run. The wire caught him chest high, yanked him backward off his horse. He hit the ground hard, skull cracking against frozen earth. His torch rolled free, sputtered in the snow. Colt fired, missed. The rider scrambled behind a tree. 2 more came from the west, moving fast, torches held high. Ada tracked the nearest one, squeezed the trigger. Her shot caught him in the leg. He went down cursing, his torch landing in a snowbank where it died with a hiss. North side, Thomas shouted. Colt spun. A rider had made it to the cabin wall, was dousing it with something from a bottle. Kerosene. The smell cut through the gunpowder smoke. Colt fired through the wall. Wood splintered. The rider screamed, stumbled back, dropped the bottle. It shattered, spread liquid fire across the snow, but didn't catch. How many left? Ada called. 3 standing, 2 wounded. We can't. A bullet punched through the shutter next to her head. She ducked, came up firing blind. Colt moved to the door, cracked it open. One of the wounded men was crawling toward his horse, leaving a blood trail in the snow. The others had pulled back to the trees again, regrouping. They were learning, getting smarter. Next rush would be coordinated, overwhelming. We need to move, Colt said. They're going to flank us. Move where? We're surrounded. The cache. It's got better cover, stone walls. We make a run for it, might buy us time. 30 yards through open ground with 3 men shooting at us? You got a better idea? Ada looked at Thomas, at the trapdoor in the floor where Emma was hiding. We'll never make it. We're dead if we stay here. She knew he was right. Colt could see it in her face, the calculation running behind her eyes. The math that said they had maybe 2 more minutes before the riders figured out how to finish this. Thomas, she said quietly, get your sister. We're moving. The boy nodded, started toward the bed. That's when the shooting stopped. Just stopped. Mid-firefight. Complete silence except for the ringing in Colt's ears and someone's labored breathing outside. "Hold fire," Colt said quietly. They waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Then a voice called out from the trees, different voice, not the lead rider from before. "Mercer, you in there?" Colt didn't answer. "I know you can hear me. My name's Carson, William Carson. I'm here to talk, not shoot, though seems like you've done plenty of that already." Still Colt said nothing. "I'm coming out, unarmed, just to talk. You shoot me, my men burn you out. We clear?" Colt glanced at Ada. She shrugged, raised her rifle. "Come out slow," Colt called back. "Hands where I can see them." A man emerged from the trees. Tall, well-dressed, wrong for this place. He wore a wool coat that probably cost more than everything Colt owned, boots polished despite the snow, a hat that belonged in a city. 50, maybe. Gray at the temples, face that had never missed a meal. He walked forward with his hands raised, stopped 20 feet from the cabin. "That's far enough," Colt said through the broken shutter. Carson nodded. "Fair. Though I'd appreciate getting out of the cold. Negotiate inside, maybe, like civilized people." "You brought guns and torches. Don't talk to me about civilized." "My men got overzealous. Happens when you hire the wrong sort." Carson looked around at the bodies in the snow, the wounded men. "Though seems like you handled them well enough." "What do you want, Carson?" "Same thing I wanted an hour ago. Ada Boone, she's got a debt to settle." "She doesn't have your money." "No, she doesn't. Her husband spent every penny before someone put him down. But here's the thing about debts, Mercer. They don't die with the debtor. They transfer to wives, to children, to anyone with a legal connection. That's not law. It is where I come from." Carson's smile was cold. "But I'm not an unreasonable man. I didn't ride all the way up this frozen hell to kill anyone. I came to offer a deal." "I'm listening." "Mrs. Boone comes with me, voluntarily, works off the debt over time. Respectable work, I assure you. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. After that, she's free. Her children stay with you, safe and sound. Everyone lives. How's that sound?" Colt looked at Ada. Her face had gone white. "What kind of work?" Colt asked. Carson's smile widened. "The kind that pays debts." "No." "Excuse me?" "I said no. She's not going anywhere with you." "Mercer, I'm trying to be reasonable here. Reasonable would have been leaving her alone when her husband died. Reasonable would have been accepting that the debt died with him. This is hunting a woman with 2 small children across 6 months and 3 territories because you want to make a point." Carson's expression hardened. "The point is that people pay what they owe, always. Otherwise, everything falls apart. Then you should have killed her husband before he spent your money." "We tried. He was surprisingly good at running. Mrs. Boone inherited that talent, it seems." Carson lowered his hand slightly. "Look, I don't enjoy this. I'm not some monster, but I have investors, obligations, a reputation to maintain. $50,000 doesn't just disappear. Someone pays. That's how it works. How much of it do you actually need back?" The question seemed to surprise Carson. "What? How much do you need, really? To satisfy your investors, maintain your reputation, all that? Give me a number." Carson studied him for a long moment. "You planning to pay it?" "I know what mountain men make, Mercer. You don't have that kind of money." "How much?" A pause. Then, 30,000 would satisfy the principal investors. The rest was interest, penalties, collection costs. I could absorb that. So this whole thing is about $30,000. This whole thing is about respect, about showing people what happens when they think they can cheat me. And if someone gave you the 30,000, would you leave Ada alone?" Carson laughed. "If someone handed me $30,000 right now, I'd forget Ada Boone ever existed. But that's not happening, is it? You live in a cabin barely fit for animals. You've got maybe $300 worth of supplies, a few weapons, some furs. Even if I cleaned you out completely, I'd be lucky to get 1,000. Colt was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if I told you where to find it?" Ada grabbed his arm. "Colt, what are you doing?" He ignored her, kept his eyes on Carson. "Marcus Boone didn't spend all your money. He hid some of it. 30,000, give or take. I know where." Carson's expression shifted. Skeptical, but interested. You're lying. Am I? Why would I lie? You're about to kill us anyway. Colt, Ada started. Where is it? Carson demanded. You agree to leave Ada and her children alone, I'll tell you. Debt forgiven. Clean slate. You walk away, never come back. And if you're lying, then you burn us out like you planned and you're no worse off than you are now. Carson considered this. The wind picked up, whistled through the trees. One of the wounded men groaned. How do you know where the money is? Carson asked. Marcus Boone used to trap these mountains before he got married, knew every cave, every hidey hole. He told someone once, bragging in a bar, that someone told me. I never had reason to look for it until now. It was complete fiction. Colt was making it up as he went, watching Carson's face, reading the greed and calculation there. Why would you give it up? Carson asked. You could keep it, use it yourself. Because I don't need money. I need you gone. And if $30,000 makes that happen, it's worth more than any fortune. Carson stepped closer. Where? Do we have a deal? Tell me where the money is, and I'll consider it. Not good enough. I need your word. In front of your men, Ada Boone and her children walk free. Debt forgiven. You never come near them again. And if the money's not there, then you can come back and kill me slow. But if it is there, you leave. Tonight. No second thoughts, no last-minute changes. You take the money and you're gone. Carson stared at him. Colt could see the wheels turning. $30,000 versus a woman who'd already cost him time, men, and credibility. The math wasn't hard. Fine, Carson said finally. You have my word. In front of my men. He raised his voice. You hear that? Money gets recovered. We're done here. Mrs. Boone's debt is settled. From the trees, someone called back, Heard. Carson looked at Colt. Now, where is it? Colt took a breath. Committed to the lie. 3 miles northeast, there's a ridge with 3 standing stones. Looks like fingers pointing at the sky. Below the middle stone, there's a cave. Back of the cave, under loose rocks. That's where he hid it. You better not be lying to me. Only one way to find out. Carson studied him for another long moment. Then he nodded. Walsh, take 2 men. Northeast ridge, 3 standing stones. Search the cave. One of the riders separated from the group, gestured to 2 others. They mounted up, headed into the trees. While we wait, Carson said, maybe you could come out here. Have this conversation like men instead of through a broken shutter. I'm fine where I am. Suit yourself. Carson produced a cigarette case, lit one with steady hands despite the cold. You know, I actually respect what you're doing here, protecting a woman you barely know. Most men would have handed her over soon as they saw our numbers. I'm not most men. Clearly. Carson exhaled smoke. What's your story, Mercer? Why is a man like you living alone on a frozen mountain? That's my business. Fair enough. Though I have to wonder, what's Ada Boone to you? Wife, lover, or just some stray you picked up out of misplaced nobility? Inside the cabin, Ada's grip on Colt's arm tightened. She's someone who needed help, Colt said. That's enough. Is it? Enough to die for? Because that's what you're risking. If that money's not where you say it is, my men are going to peel your skin off 1 inch at a time. I know where I'm sending them. Do you? Or are you betting everything on a bluff, hoping I'll take the deal and leave before we find out you're lying? Colt didn't answer, didn't need to. They both knew the truth. Carson smoked his cigarette, watching the tree line where his men had disappeared. How long you think it'll take them? Depends on how hard they search. And how big this cave is. Big enough to hide $30,000. Or nothing at all. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. The sun was starting to sink behind the western peaks, throwing long shadows across the snow. The wounded men had stopped groaning. Either they'd passed out or bled out. Colt couldn't tell which. Thomas stood by his window, rifle ready. Emma was still under the bed. Ada hadn't moved from Colt's side. There's no money, is there? She whispered. No. Then what are you doing? Buying time. For what? I don't know yet. At 15 minutes, one of Carson's riders came back, alone. His horse was lathered, breathing hard. Well? Carson called. The rider shook his head. Nothing. We tore that cave apart. No money. No sign anyone's been there in years. Carson's expression went cold. He turned slowly to face the cabin. Mercer. Yeah. You lied to me. Yeah. You understand what that means. I understand you're a man who makes his living hurting people weaker than you. I understand you dress it up and talk about debts and respect and obligations, but at the end of the day, you're just a bully with money, and I understand that I'd rather burn alive than watch you take that woman and her children. Carson dropped his cigarette, ground it into the snow with his expensive boot. I was going to make this quick, he said quietly. Now I'm going to make it hurt. He gestured to his men. They spread out, flanking the cabin from 3 sides. Last chance, Mercer. Send out Ada Boone and I'll let you and the children live. Colt looked at Ada. She looked back and something passed between them. An understanding, a choice made together. No, Colt said. Carson nodded like he'd expected nothing else. Then I hope you made peace with however you measure these things, because you're all dead. He raised his hand. Colt tightened his grip on the rifle. Ada did the same. Thomas moved to his position. Under the bed, Emma made a small sound. Carson's hand started to drop, and then, from the trees behind him, a voice called out, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Everyone froze. A man stepped out of the forest, older, 60 at least, dressed in furs that had seen better days. He carried a rifle like it was part of his arm, moved like someone who'd spent his whole life in the mountains. The old trapper, the one who'd told Ada about the cabin. Who the hell are you? Carson demanded. Name's Garrett. I trap these mountains. Have for 40 years. And I'm here to tell you that you're about to make a very expensive mistake. This doesn't concern you, old man. It does if you're planning to kill folks on land that's under my protection. Carson laughed. Your protection? What are you, the local sheriff? No. I'm the man who knows the territorial governor, who happens to be in the valley right now, who happens to be very interested in reports of armed men terrorizing widows and children. Garrett shifted his rifle slightly. He's also interested in outstanding warrants. You wouldn't happen to have any of those, would you, Mr. Carson? Carson's face went very still. That's what I thought, Garrett continued. See, I was down in Helena last week, heard some interesting things about a businessman from Denver who's been running a loan operation that crosses into territory where he doesn't have jurisdiction, about money laundering, about connections to some very questionable people. He smiled, showing teeth. The governor's offering a reward, $500 for information leading to arrest. You're bluffing. Am I? Only one way to find out. You could ride down there, explain yourself to the territorial marshal. I'm sure he'd love to hear your side of things. Carson's jaw worked. Behind him, his men shifted nervously. Or, Garrett said, you could take what's left of your wounded, ride out of here and never come back. Forget about Ada Boone. Forget about the debt. Forget this place exists. Because if I see you up here again, I won't be coming alone next time. I'll bring the marshal and a federal judge, and we'll sort through every business deal you've made in the last 10 years. The silence stretched out, taut as wire. Finally, Carson spoke. You have proof of any of this? Do I need proof? Or do I just need to point the right people in your direction and let them dig? Another long pause. Then Carson turned to his men. Get the wounded. We're leaving. But sir, now. They scrambled to obey, loading the injured men onto horses, gathering weapons. Carson mounted his own horse, looked down at the cabin one last time. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yeah, Garrett replied. It is. Carson stared at him for another moment. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode into the trees, his men following. They waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely, until there was nothing but wind and silence. Then Garrett lowered his rifle and walked to the cabin. Colt opened the door. You're late, he said. Had to wait until the moment was right. Too early, he might have called my bluff. Too late, you'd all be dead. Were you bluffing? About the governor? Garrett grinned. Of course I was. Governor's in Santa Fe, been there for months. But Carson didn't know that, and he's got enough dirt on him that he couldn't risk finding out. Ada appeared in the doorway. You saved our lives. Actually, Mercer here saved your lives. I just gave him an exit. Garrett looked at Colt. That was a hell of a play, sending them on a wild goose chase. Didn't work. Worked long enough. Gave me time to get into position. He glanced at the cabin, at Thomas visible through the window, at Emma peeking out from under the bed. You got coffee in there. Yeah. Then invite me in before I freeze to death. We need to talk about what happens next. Inside, Garrett warmed himself by the fire while Ada poured coffee. Emma came out from under the bed, stayed close to her mother. Thomas cleaned his rifle with shaking hands, adrenaline finally catching up to him. "They'll be back," Garrett said. "Not today, probably not this winter. But Carson's not the type to forget. He'll wait, bide his time. Come at you when you don't expect it." "We'll be ready," Colt said. "Will you? You got lucky today. If I hadn't shown up, you'd be dead." "If you hadn't shown up, I would have found another way." Garrett studied him. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just stubborn enough to get yourself killed trying. What do you suggest?" "Ada needs to disappear, new name, new life, somewhere Carson can't find her." "I'm not running anymore," Ada said quietly. "I spent 6 months running. I'm done." "Then you're dead." "Maybe not today, but eventually." "Maybe. But at least I'll die on my own terms." Garrett shook his head. "You've got kids to think about." "I know. That's why I'm staying." Ada looked at Colt. "He's giving us a chance. First real chance we've had. I'm not walking away from that." "Even if it gets you killed?" "Even then." Garrett sighed, drank his coffee. "You're all crazy. You know that?" "Probably," Colt agreed. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle. Finally, Garrett stood. "I should go. Got traps to check." "Stay the night," Colt offered. "Head out at first light." "Can't. Storm's coming. I can smell it. Need to get to lower ground before it hits." He gathered his things, moved to the door. Paused. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're doing the right thing. Stupid, but right." He looked at Ada. "You've got good kids, and you found a good man. Don't waste it." "I won't," Ada said. Garrett nodded once, then stepped out into the cold. They watched him disappear into the trees, a shadow among shadows. When he was gone, Colt closed the door, bolted it. "Is it really over?" Thomas asked. "For now." "But he'll come back." "Probably." "Then we need to get ready." Colt looked at this 8-year-old boy who spoke like a soldier, who'd just survived a firefight, who was already planning for the next war. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We do." That night they buried the bodies, not out of respect, but because leaving corpses around attracted predators. They worked in silence, digging graves in frozen ground, marking them with simple stones. When they were done, Ada stood looking at the fresh mounds. "I should feel something," she said. "Guilt, remorse, something. But I don't." "They came to kill you," Colt said. "You don't owe them anything." "They were still people." "They stopped being people when they chose to hurt children." Ada nodded slowly. "Marcus used to say that some choices stripped away your humanity. I never understood it until now." They walked back to the cabin together. Inside, Thomas and Emma were already asleep, curled together on the bed. Colt and Ada stood by the fire, not speaking, just existing in the same space. "Thank you," Ada said finally. "For what?" "For not giving up. For not handing us over. For fighting. I told you I would. People say a lot of things. You're the first one who actually meant it." Colt didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to explain that he'd needed them as much as they'd needed him. That they'd given him something to fight for besides survival. So he just nodded. Ada moved closer, rested her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her, held her while she shook with everything she'd been holding back. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall. The mountains settled in for another long winter. And in a cabin that had known only silence for 15 years, a family that shouldn't exist found a way to survive. The second storm lasted 3 weeks. Not one storm, really, but a series of them rolling over the mountain like waves, each one colder and meaner than the last. Snow piled so high it buried the windows. The world disappeared behind white walls that never seemed to end. They were trapped, completely cut off. If Carson had decided to come back, they wouldn't have known until he was at the door. But he didn't come. Days bled into each other in ways that made time feel elastic, meaningless. Colt taught Thomas how to maintain weapons, how to read weather, how to think 3 steps ahead in a fight. The boy absorbed everything with that same quiet intensity, never complaining, never questioning. His hands grew steadier, his eyes sharper. He was becoming someone who could survive anything. Sometimes Colt watched him and felt a pang of something that might have been guilt. The kid was 9 years old and already knew how to kill. Already understood that survival sometimes meant doing things that left scars you couldn't see. "You think I'm ruining him?" Colt asked Ada one night after the kids were asleep. She was mending clothes by the fire, her needle moving in quick, efficient strokes. "Ruining him how?" "Teaching him all this, violence, death, things a kid shouldn't have to know." Ada was quiet for a moment, considering. "You're teaching him to survive in a world that's already tried to kill him twice. That's not ruining him, that's loving him." "Doesn't feel like love. Love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's teaching your son how to shoot straight so he can protect his sister. Sometimes it's showing him that strength isn't just about guns and fists. It's about knowing when to use them and when to walk away." She looked up from her sewing. "Marcus never taught Thomas anything except how to hide and be quiet and wait for the next beating. You're teaching him how to stand up, how to fight back, how to be more than a victim. That's love." Colt thought about that. About the difference between preparing someone for the world and breaking them with it. "What if I get it wrong?" he asked. "Then you get it wrong, but at least you're trying. That's more than most fathers do." The word hung in the air between them. Father. Not exactly true, but not exactly false either. Thomas had started calling him Colt instead of Sir. Emma had started asking him to tuck her in at night. They were becoming something. Maybe not a normal family, but a family nonetheless. Ada turned the cabin into something more than shelter during those long winter weeks. She cooked meals that made their limited supplies taste like abundance. Stews that stretched for days, bread that came out perfect despite the altitude, desserts made from dried fruit and honey that made Emma's eyes light up. She patched clothes that should have been thrown out years ago, turned old blankets into new shirts, created warmth from scraps and determination. She also started singing, quietly at first, while she worked. Old songs Colt half remembered from before. Songs about home and longing and better days. Her voice wasn't particularly good, a little flat, a little rough, but it filled the cabin with something that had been missing. Joy, maybe. Or just the sound of someone who'd stopped being afraid long enough to make noise. And Emma! Emma started laughing again. It happened slowly at first. A smile here, a giggle there. Then one morning she was chasing Thomas around the cabin, both of them shrieking like the world outside didn't exist, like danger was a fairy tale they'd outgrown. "They're going to break something," Ada said, but she was smiling. "Let them." "You say that now. Wait until it's your rifle they knock over." "Then I'll teach them to be more careful." Emma collided with his leg, wrapped her arms around it. "Colt, Tommy says the storm's going to last forever." "It's not." "How do you know?" "Because nothing lasts forever, good or bad. Everything ends eventually." She tilted her head, studying him with those big dark eyes that saw too much. "Even you and Mama?" The question caught him off guard. Ada looked up from her work, equally surprised. "What do you mean, baby?" Ada asked. "Tommy says grown-ups always leave. He says Daddy left, and the people in Helena left, and everyone always leaves." Emma's grip on Colt's leg tightened. "Are you going to leave too?" Colt crouched down so he was at her eye level. "You know what the difference is between me and all those other people?" "What?" "I chose to stay. When things got hard. When men came with guns. When it would have been easier to send you away. I chose to stay. And I'm going to keep choosing to stay. Every single day. Understand?" Emma studied his face, looking for the lie. She'd gotten good at that, spotting lies. Too good for a 5-year-old. Finally, she nodded. "Promise?" "Promise." She threw her arms around his neck, squeezed tight. Over her shoulder, Colt saw Thomas watching from across the room. The boy's face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were wet. "You too, Tommy," Colt said. "Come here." Thomas hesitated. Then he crossed the room and let himself be pulled into the embrace. They stayed like that for a long moment, Colt and these two kids who weren't his but somehow were, while Ada watched with tears streaming down her face. "Okay," Emma said, finally pulling back. "Now you have to play hide and seek with us." "I have to?" "You promised you'd stay. That means you have to play." "That's not what that means." "Yes, it is. Isn't it, Mama?" Ada smiled. "I think it is, actually." Colt sighed dramatically. Fine, but I'm counting to 100, and if I find you too fast, you have to help me check the traps tomorrow. Deal! Emma grabbed Thomas's hand and they ran to hide. Colt started counting, heard them scrambling around, whispering, giggling, heard Ada trying not to laugh. When he got to 100, he made a big show of searching, looked in obvious places first. Let them think they were clever. Finally, found them in the same corner they always hid in. They played for an hour, then another, until the kids were exhausted and happy, and the cabin felt less like a fortress and more like a home. That night, after they'd all gone to bed, Ada came and sat beside Colt by the fire. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For playing with them. For making them feel safe. For being exactly what they needed." "I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him tense. "What?" "I lied to you, about Marcus, about the money, about all of it." "I know." She blinked. "You know?" "I knew from the start. The math didn't add up. $50,000 is more than most people see in a lifetime. If Marcus had really stolen that much, Carson would have sent 20 men, not 6, would have burned you out without talking first, would have had legal authority behind him instead of just hired guns. Then why didn't you say anything? Because it didn't matter. You were running. You were scared. You had reasons. That was enough." Ada pulled her hand away, wrapped her arms around herself. It wasn't 50,000. It was 5,000. And Marcus didn't steal it from some criminal empire. He cheated at cards. One big off a man named William Carson who didn't like losing. Carson's men came after us, but it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about Marcus embarrassing Carson in front of his people, making him look weak, making him look like a fool. She paused, took a shaky breath. "And the thing is, I knew. I knew Marcus was cheating. I saw him marking cards the night before, and I didn't say anything because we needed the money. We were broke, had creditors coming after us. I thought if he could just win big once, we could pay everyone off and start over." Her voice cracked. "But he won too big, off the wrong person. And when Carson's men came, when they said we owed them, when they said they'd take my children if I couldn't pay, I panicked. I made up the rest, made it bigger, made it sound worse. Because I thought if it sounded bad enough, terrible enough, you might understand why I couldn't go back. You didn't need to lie. Didn't I? You don't know what it's like, being me, being the woman everyone looks past, everyone dismisses." She stood, paced to the window. "I've spent my whole life making myself smaller, quieter, less, trying to take up less space so maybe people wouldn't notice how much space I actually take up. And it never worked. People still saw me, still judged me, still decided I was lazy or stupid or worthless because I'm fat." "Ada, no. Let me finish." She turned to face him, and her expression was fierce. "When Marcus proposed, I knew he didn't love me, knew he was settling. But I said yes anyway because I thought it was the best I'd ever get. And for 10 years, I lived with a man who treated me like I was lucky to have him, who reminded me every day that no one else would want me, who made me feel grateful for scraps of basic human decency." Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice was steady. "Then he died, and I thought, finally I can figure out who I am without someone telling me what I should be, but then Carson came, and I realized that even in death, Marcus was still controlling my life, still ruining everything. So I ran, and I lied, and I made myself even smaller, even more apologetic, even more invisible, because that's what I've always done." She wiped her face roughly. "But then I met you, and you looked at me and saw—" Her voice broke. "You saw me. Not what everyone else sees, not the weight or the past or the failure. You saw me, and you didn't ask me to be smaller or quieter or less. You just let me exist, and I didn't know what to do with that because no one's ever done that before." Colt stood, crossed to where she was standing. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I'm not sure I can handle the truth. I see a woman who walked through a killing storm with 2 children because she refused to give up. I see someone who reorganized my entire cabin in one night because she can't stand inefficiency. I see a mother who'd burned the world down before she let anyone hurt her kids. I see someone strong and smart and capable who spent too long believing lies people told her about herself." I'm not strong. I'm just desperate. You're both, and you didn't break. That's strength. Ada shook her head. You don't understand. I've made so many mistakes. Married the wrong man. Stayed too long. Let my kids see things they shouldn't have seen. And the lying, I lied to you about something important because I was scared you wouldn't think I was worth fighting for if you knew the truth was smaller, sadder, more pathetic. Colt caught her face in his hands, made her look at him. Listen to me. I don't care if it was $5 or $5 million. I don't care if Marcus stole it or won it or found it in the street. I don't care about any of it except this. You showed up at my door with 2 dying children and you fought like hell to keep them alive. That's what matters. That's all that's ever mattered. But I lied. Because you're human. Because you were scared. Because you've spent your whole life being told you're not enough. And you believed it. He brushed tears from her cheeks. But you are enough. You've always been enough. And I'm sorry no one ever told you that before. Ada crumpled. Just folded in on herself. Every wall she'd built coming down at once. Colt caught her. Held her while she shook with years of pain and shame and fear that had nowhere left to go. I'm so tired, she whispered against his chest. I'm so tired of being afraid, of waiting for people to leave, of believing I deserve it when they do. Then stop. Stop being afraid. Stop waiting. Stop believing lies. I don't know how. You learn, same way you learned everything else, one day at a time. They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, while outside the storm raged and inside the world slowly rearranged itself into something new. The storm finally broke in late February. Colt woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in the shutters. Real sunlight, not the weak gray light they'd had for weeks. He opened the door, stepped out onto the porch, and stared. The world had been remade. Snow everywhere, pristine and blinding. The trees bowed under the weight of it. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at. And the silence, the absolute crystalline silence, was like standing inside a held breath. It's beautiful, Ada said behind him. Yeah. Think the pass is clear? Give it another week, maybe 2. And then? And then we see what comes next. But what came next wasn't what they expected. Garrett showed up 3 days later, riding hard, his horse lathered and breathing hard. Trouble? Colt asked, stepping out with his rifle. Depends on your definition. Garrett dismounted, looked around. Carson's dead. The words hung in the cold air. When? Ada asked from the doorway. 2 weeks ago. Pneumonia. Went quick, from what I heard. Colt and Ada exchanged glances. You came all the way up here to tell us that? Colt asked. Not just that. He left something. Instructions. Said in case he died before settling certain accounts, there were people who needed to know they were free. Garrett pulled a leather folder from his saddlebag. You might want to sit down for this. They went inside. Thomas and Emma watched from the bed, curious but quiet. Garrett spread papers across the table. Official-looking documents, sealed and stamped. Carson had this drawn up 6 months ago, he said. Legal and binding. Says the debt owed by Marcus Boone is hereby forgiven. Ada Boone and her children are released from all obligations, real or perceived, effective immediately. Ada stared at the papers like they might bite her. Why? There's a letter. Garrett produced it. You want me to read it, or you want to do it yourself? You read it, Ada said. Her voice was shaking. Garrett unfolded the letter, cleared his throat. To Ada Boone and those protecting her. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Good. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who didn't deserve it. Let pride drive me to become the kind of man I swore I'd never be. Chasing you and your children across 3 territories, hunting a widow over a card game, that was the lowest. I told myself it was about the money, about respect, about teaching people not to cross me. But the truth is, it was about ego, about being embarrassed by a 2-bit gambler in front of my associates, about needing to prove I was still dangerous, still feared, still relevant. Garrett paused, looked at Ada. She nodded for him to continue. I realized something these past few months. I'm 63 years old. I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've got power and influence and everything I thought I wanted. But I don't have peace. Can't sleep most nights. Keep seeing your face, Mrs. Boone, when my men cornered you and Helena. Keep seeing those children hiding behind you. Keep wondering what kind of man terrorizes a family over $5,000 he doesn't even need. Another pause. Emma had moved closer, listening. So I'm making it right. The debt is forgiven. Your children are protected. I've set up trust funds, $500 each, to be accessed when they turn 18. It's not enough. Nothing I do can erase what I put you through, but it's something. And maybe if there's anything after this, maybe it'll count for something there too. Live your life, Mrs. Boone. Raise your children. Be happy. And forget William Carson ever existed. Signed, William Carson, October 18th, 1873. Silence filled the cabin. Ada's hands were shaking. He forgave it. More than that, Garrett said. He filed it with the territorial court, made it official. Anyone comes after you claiming Marcus's debt, they got no legal standing. You're free, completely free. But why? Ada's voice broke. Why now? After everything? Guilt, maybe, redemption, or maybe he just got tired of being the monster. Garrett folded the letter. Does it matter? I don't know. Does it? Colt put his hand on her shoulder. He's dead. The debt's gone. That's all that matters. But Ada was crying now, great shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep. I spent 6 months running, 6 months terrified, teaching my children to hide, to lie, to be afraid of everything, and he just forgave it, like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing to him, Garrett said quietly. That letter. He rewrote it a dozen times. I know because his lawyer told me. He was trying to find the right words, trying to explain, trying to make it mean something. It doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't, but it makes it over. Ada wiped her face, looked at the papers spread across the table. Legal documents that said she was free, that her children were safe, that the nightmare was finished. What do I do now? She whispered. Whatever you want, Colt said. For the first time in your life, you get to choose. That night, after Garrett had left and the kids were asleep, Colt and Ada sat by the fire. I don't know how to not be running, Ada said. Don't know how to just exist without fear. You learn. How did you learn? After Sarah. After everything. Colt thought about it, about the 15 years he'd spent on this mountain, convinced that isolation was safety. I didn't. Not until you showed up. I just existed, survived, went through the motions. But I wasn't living. Not really. And now? Now I'm living. Because of you, because of them. He gestured toward the kids. You gave me a reason. I didn't give you anything. I brought trouble to your door. You brought life to my door. There's a difference. Ada leaned her head on his shoulder. What happens now? Now that we're really free? We build something, a real life, gardens, additions to the cabin, futures for the kids, whatever we want. Just like that? Just like that. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, Colt? Yeah? Will you marry me? He pulled back, looked at her face. She was serious. You asking me? Someone has to, and I'm tired of waiting for things to happen to me. I want to make them happen. Her eyes were bright. So, will you? Colt thought about all the reasons to say no. Thought about Sarah and betrayal and the vows he'd broken once before. Thought about how he'd sworn never to give anyone that kind of power over him again. Then he looked at Ada. Really looked at her. At this woman who'd walked through fire to protect her children, who'd trusted him when she had no reason to, who made him want to be better than he was. Yeah, he said. I will. She smiled. The real smile. The one that lit up her whole face. When? Whenever you want. Tomorrow? Garrett left this morning. The next time he comes through. That could be months. I've waited my whole life to feel like this. I can wait a few more months. She kissed him, soft and certain. I love you, Colt Mercer. I love you too, Ada Boone. Soon to be Ada Mercer. Soon to be Ada Mercer, he agreed. They were married in late spring when Garrett made his next run through the mountains. It wasn't fancy. No church, no witnesses except 2 children and an old trapper. Ada wore a dress she'd made from fabric Garrett had brought up from the valley. Colt wore his cleanest shirt. Emma scattered wildflowers. Thomas stood witness, solemn and serious. Garrett said the words, a mix of traditional vows and things he made up on the spot. Colt and Ada repeated them, meaning every syllable. When it was done, when they'd been pronounced husband and wife, Emma cheered. Thomas tried not to smile and failed. Garrett produced a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving. They ate dinner as a family, told stories, laughed, made plans. And for the first time since Colt had climbed this mountain all those years ago, he felt like he'd come home. But peace, real peace, takes time to settle in. The first year was hardest. Ada would wake up screaming, convinced men were at the door. Thomas would flinch at sudden movements, years of abuse written into his reflexes. Emma would go days without speaking, lost in memories no child should have. Colt wasn't much better. He'd catch himself checking the tree line for riders, counting ammunition, making escape plans. His body knew how to survive, but his mind didn't know how to stop preparing for war. They worked through it together, slowly. Ada learned to sleep through the night. Thomas learned to stand up straight, to look people in the eye, to believe he deserved space in the world. Emma learned to laugh without looking over her shoulder first. Colt learned to put down the rifle, to trust that the silence was real, to believe that the happiness he felt wasn't something that would be ripped away the moment he stopped defending it. They planted gardens that first spring. Most of the seeds didn't take. The altitude was wrong, the soil poor, the growing season too short. But a few things grew, enough to give them hope. They expanded the cabin, added a second room so the kids could have their own space, built furniture, created permanence. Thomas learned to read using books Garrett brought from the valley. He was slow at first, struggling with words that didn't make sense, but he persisted. By the end of the first year, he was reading better than most kids his age. Emma discovered she had a talent for numbers, could do arithmetic in her head that left Colt scrambling. Ada started teaching her properly, using beans and stones and whatever else they had. "She's smart," Ada said one night, watching Emma solve problems. "Really smart. She could do something, be something." "She already is something," Colt said. "You know what I mean. School, a real education, a life that's more than this mountain. You want to leave?" "No, but I want her to have the choice, when she's old enough, to stay or go, to be whatever she wants to be." Colt understood. The mountain was safety, but it was also limitation. And Ada wanted more for her children than just survival. "We'll make sure she has that choice," he said. Years passed like water, smooth and steady. Thomas turned 12, then 14, then 16. Shot up tall and lean, all sharp angles and quiet competence. He could track better than Colt, shoot almost as well, and had developed an instinct for reading weather that bordered on supernatural. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was genuine, real, the product of actual joy instead of performance. One day when he was 17, he came to Colt with a question. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How do you know if you're a good person?" The question caught Colt off guard. "What brought this on?" "I killed a man once. Well, almost, that day at the cabin. I shot at Carson's men. Hit one, I think. I've never been sure if he lived or died." Thomas looked at his hands. "And sometimes I dream about it, about pulling the trigger. And in the dream, I'm not scared, I'm not sad, I'm just calm. Like it's something I was always going to do." Colt sat down, gestured for Thomas to do the same. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Always. I don't know if there's such a thing as a good person or a bad person. I think there's just people, and they make choices. Some good, some bad, most somewhere in between." He paused. "You shot at men who were trying to kill your family. That's not evil, that's survival." "But what if I liked it?" "Did you?" Thomas thought about it. "No, but I wasn't sorry either. And shouldn't I be sorry? Shouldn't I feel bad about it?" "Maybe. Or maybe you just accepted that it had to be done and didn't waste time on guilt that doesn't change anything." Colt leaned forward. "You want to know how I measure if I'm doing right?" "How?" "I ask myself if I'm making the world better or worse for the people I care about, if I'm protecting them or hurting them, if I'm building something or tearing it down. That's it. That's the only measure that matters." Thomas nodded slowly. "And if you get it wrong, then you try to do better next time. That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence for a while. Then Thomas said, "Thank you for being here, for teaching me, for not being like Marcus." "Your father." "No. Marcus was my father. You're my dad. There's a difference. The words hit Colt harder than he expected. He'd never thought of himself as anyone's father. Never thought he deserved that title. But looking at Thomas, at this young man who'd grown up strong and capable and good despite everything, maybe he'd earned it after all. "You're going to be okay," Colt said. "You know that?" "Yeah, I know." And he would be. Colt could see it. Thomas would grow up, leave the mountain, build a life. He'd carry scars, sure, but he wouldn't let them define him. Emma grew too, turned into a young woman who asked too many questions and didn't accept easy answers. She devoured every book Garrett brought, taught herself subjects that most people never learned. By the time she was 15, she knew more about medicine than the doctor in the valley. "I want to help people," she told Ada one day. "Like really help them, not just exist." "Then you will," Ada said. "How? I'm stuck on a mountain." "You're not stuck, you're preparing, learning. When you're ready, you'll go out there and show them what you can do." "What if I'm not good enough?" Ada looked at her daughter, at this brilliant girl who'd survived trauma that destroyed most people. "Emma, you're more than good enough. You always have been." Emma left when she was 18, went east to study medicine, wrote letters every month about what she was learning, who she was becoming. Thomas left a year later, became a guide for settlers coming west, built a reputation as someone who could find routes no one else could, who kept people safe through territory that killed others. Both of them came back regularly, brought stories, brought grandchildren eventually, brought proof that the life Ada and Colt had built had given them something real. The trust fund money Carson had left helped. $500 each had seemed like nothing when Emma and Thomas were children. But by the time they were ready to leave, it was enough to give them starts. School for Emma, equipment for Thomas. Foundations. "He did one good thing," Ada said once, watching Emma's first letter about medical school. In the end, Carson did one good thing. "Doesn't erase the rest," Colt said. "No, but it counts for something." They grew old together, Colt and Ada. The cabin expanded over the years, the garden flourished. The life they'd built became something neither of them had expected, something good and real and lasting. On their 10th anniversary, they were sitting on the porch, same spot as always. Ada's hair had gone gray. Colt's beard was white. Their hands were weathered and scarred from years of work. "Do you ever regret it?" Ada asked. "Letting us in?" "Never. Not even when things were hard, especially not then." "Why?" "Because hard things that matter are better than easy things that don't." Ada smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just learned the difference between existing and living. Took me long enough." She leaned against him, and they watched the sun sink behind the western peaks. The mountain turned gold, then orange, then purple. "You know what I think?" Ada said. "What?" "I think everyone spends their whole life looking for a place where they belong, where they fit, where they're not too much or too little or wrong in some fundamental way." She squeezed his hand. "Most people never find it. They just keep searching until they die. But we found it, right here, against all odds, in the middle of nowhere. We found exactly where we belong." "You belong anywhere you choose to be," Colt said. "That's what I learned. It's not about the place. It's about the people." "Then I choose here, with you, always." "Good, because you're stuck with me. Worst fate imaginable. The absolute worst." They laughed together, the sound echoing across the valley. More years passed. They watched their grandchildren grow, watched the world change around them. The valley got bigger. Towns sprouted up. Railroads came through. The frontier started to feel less wild. But the mountain stayed the same, constant, unchanging, a place outside of time. Colt was 72 when the rider came. It was summer, hot and dry. Ada was tending the garden. Colt was on the porch, watching hawks circle overhead. The rider was young, maybe 25. He dismounted slowly, kept his hands visible. "Colt Mercer?" he called. "Who's asking?" "My name's Daniel Walsh. I work for William Carson." Colt felt Ada tense behind him. He kept his voice even. "Carson's been dead 20 years. I know. I work for his estate, tying up loose ends." Walsh pulled a paper from his coat. "There's something you should know. About the trust funds Carson set up." "What about them?" "They've been growing. 20 years of compound interest. They're worth a lot more now than they were. And according to Carson's will, when the beneficiaries turn 40, they get the full amount plus all accumulated interest. How much are we talking about? Thomas's fund is worth about $8,000 now. Emma's is closer to 9. She invested hers better. Colt stared. That's a fortune. It is. And there's more. Carson left instructions. If the beneficiaries had children, those children get funds too. Smaller, but still substantial. Walsh consulted his papers. Thomas has 3 children. Emma has 2. That's 5 more trusts. Each one starts at $200. Ada had come to stand beside Colt. Why are you telling us this? Because Carson's will stipulates that the patriarch of the family, that's you, Mr. Mercer, gets to decide how the money's distributed, when the children receive it, what conditions are attached. Carson wanted to give the family control, said it was the least he could do. Colt and Ada exchanged glances. There's one more thing, Walsh said. Carson left a letter. For you specifically, Mr. Mercer. He wrote it the day before he died. He held out an envelope. I was told to deliver it in person. Colt took the envelope. His name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. Walsh mounted his horse. I'll be at the trading post in the valley for 3 more days. If you have questions about the trust, come find me. Otherwise, the papers are filed with the territorial bank. Everything's legal and binding. He rode away, leaving Colt holding the letter. You going to open it? Ada asked. Not sure I want to. Might be important. Colt broke the seal, unfolded the letter. Read it once, then again. What does it say? Ada asked. Colt handed it to her. She read aloud. Mr. Mercer, we never met face to face, but I know you. Know what you did. You stood between my men and a woman you barely knew. Faced down certain death because it was right. I respected that. Still do. You're the kind of man I wish I'd been. The kind who chooses people over pride. Who builds instead of destroys. Who loves instead of controls. I spent my life accumulating wealth I'll never use and power that never made me happy. You spent yours building a family. I think you got the better deal. The money I left, it's not payment. It's not redemption. It's just recognition of what you did, what you built, what you chose. Use it well. Raise those grandchildren to be better than their grandfather, better than me, better than all of us who came before and got it wrong. And if there's anything after this, if I see you again somewhere down the line, maybe you'll tell me I did one thing right at the end. Respectfully, William Carson. But son tasabu isosamis. Ada folded the letter carefully. He knew. Knew what? That it wasn't about the money. Never was. It was about choosing to care, choosing to fight, choosing love over everything else. Colt thought about Carson, about a man who'd spent his life being feared and died alone, trying to buy forgiveness with money he couldn't take with him. You think he found peace, like Ada asked. I don't know. Hope so. Nobody deserves to die without it. They stood there for a while, holding the letter, thinking about choices and consequences, and the strange ways life circled back on itself. That night they wrote to Thomas and Emma, told them about the money, about Carson's final gift, about the letter and what it meant. Both of them wrote back saying the same thing. Use it for the grandchildren, for education, for opportunities, for building something that lasts. And they did. The money paid for schools, for medical training, for businesses that grew and prospered. Carson's guilt money became something good, something that helped instead of hurt. Colt was 80 when Ada got sick. It started small. A cough that wouldn't go away. Tiredness that sleep didn't fix. Then it got worse. Emma came, diagnosed it quickly. Something in the lungs, something that didn't have a cure. How long? Colt asked. 6 months. Maybe a year if we're lucky. Ada took it calmly. I've had a good life. Better than I ever expected. I'm not complaining. But Colt was. He was furious at the universe, at the unfairness of finding happiness only to have it stolen, at the idea of going back to being alone after 30 years of not being alone. I'm not ready, he told her one night. Neither am I. But we don't get to choose. We should. We should get to choose. Ada took his hand. Colt, look at me. I was supposed to die in that storm 30 years ago. Me and my kids. We were supposed to freeze to death in the dark. But we didn't. Because you opened a door. You gave me 30 years I never should have had. 30 years of being loved, of being seen, of being enough. That's more than most people get in a lifetime. It's not enough for me. I know. But it's what we have. So let's not waste it being angry about what we're losing. Let's spend it being grateful for what we had. She lasted 8 months, long enough to see spring one more time, long enough to say goodbye to her children and grandchildren, long enough to make sure Colt knew he'd made her happy. She died on a Tuesday morning in early April, quietly, peacefully. With Colt holding her hand, Thomas and Emma came for the funeral, brought their families. They buried Ada on a hill overlooking the valley, where she could see the garden she'd planted and the cabin she'd made into a home. Afterward, Emma asked, "What will you do now?" "Stay here. Where else would I go?" "You could come live with me, or Thomas. You don't have to be alone." "I'm not alone. She's here, you're here, all of it's here." And it was. In the cabin they'd expanded together. In the garden that still grew every spring. In the mountains that had witnessed everything. Colt lived another 5 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, long enough to finish carving stories into wood for Emma's youngest, long enough to make peace with the fact that everyone leaves eventually, but what they build stays behind. He died in his sleep at 85. Thomas and Emma found him in his chair by the fire, a letter to Ada on his lap that he'd never sent. They buried him next to her on the same hill, under the same sky. Years later, someone would ask Emma what made her grandfather special. She thought about it, about the stories she'd heard, about the man who'd opened his door in a storm and changed everything. "He chose love," she said finally. "When it would have been easier to choose safety, when it would have been smarter to choose isolation. When everyone else was choosing themselves, he chose us. And that made all the difference." Because in the end, that's what life comes down to. The doors we open, the people we let in, the choice to risk everything for something real. Colt Mercer had spent 15 years running from that truth. Then he'd spent 30 years living it. And in those 30 years, he'd built something that lasted long after he was gone. Not wealth, not power, not fame. Just a family. Just love. Just proof that one person choosing to care can change the world for someone else. The cabin still stands on that mountain. Different people live there now. But sometimes, when the wind is right, you can almost hear children laughing, can almost smell bread baking, can almost feel the warmth of a fire that refused to go out. And on a hill overlooking the valley, 2 graves sit side by side. Colt Mercer and Ada Mercer, husband and wife, who proved that it's never too late to choose love, never too late to open a door, never too late to become who you were always meant to be. The mountain remembers, and that's enough.